She was bullied by everyone.
In her side now?
What the fuck is wrong with you?
But the CIA saw in her what no one else had ever seen before. So, they hired her for one of the most impossible missions in U.S. history. Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me.
You're gonna have a very, very big decision to make.
In the middle of Syria, a woman named Cobain, who secretly works for the CIA, finds herself in deep trouble. She's been hiding her real identity while doing undercover work, but things go south fast. A bunch of armed men are hot on her heels, and she's got no choice but to duck into an old building and squeeze herself under the floorboards. It's dark, cramped, and she's terrified, but she manages to get in touch with her CIA contact to let them know her cover's been blown. Turns out, a cross tattoo she forgot to cover up was spotted, and now everyone knows she's not who she pretended to be. Not too far from her location, there's a nearby CIA base where a guy named Joe McNamara is stationed. Joe, along with a few folks who are part of this special project called the Linus Program, are keeping an eye on things from their compound. Just as they're doing their usual checks, they spot this local guy crawling toward their base, dragging something behind him. It seems off, but before they can react, Joe gets a call from Cobain, the agent in hiding. She spills the beans about her tattoo being seen and begs for an extraction before things spiral even more out of control. But they don't get the chance to act fast enough. That crawling man, he had a detonation device, and before anyone can stop him, a massive explosion goes off. Chaos erupts as gunmen seem to pop out of every shadow, and bullets start flying everywhere. Joe's instincts kick in, and she calls in an airstrike to even the odds. It doesn't take long before a powerful gunship swoops in, blasting away and giving the team enough cover to try and get Cobain out. Back at base, Joe is still trying to figure out how to save the agent. Cobain calls again, scared out of her mind, saying that the bad guys are closing in fast. Joe knows she doesn't have much time. She contacts her boss to get permission for another extraction attempt. But before she hears back, she listens helplessly as Cobain screams on the other end. She's been caught. Joe, without wasting a second, makes a tough call. She tells the airstrike team to hit the compound where Cobain was hiding. Moments later, the area is reduced to rubble. Joe just stands there, processing what she's done, hoping it was the right choice. Somewhere else, a woman named Cruz is dragging herself home after a rough day flipping burgers at a local diner. She's exhausted, smells like grease, and makes barely enough money to cover the bills. Her loser boyfriend is lounging on the couch with his deadbeat friends, making her feel even worse. He mocks her paycheck, comparing it to some other girl who makes way more money dancing at a club. Cruz fires back, calling that girl a stripper, and a fight breaks out. Things escalate quickly, and her boyfriend ends up hitting her. She quietly goes to her room, hides under the covers, and cries until she can't anymore. She's beyond done with this life. The next morning, she wakes up before the guy stirs and grabs a frying pan from the kitchen. She already knows how the day is going to go, and she's not about to let it happen again. As soon as he opens his mouth to start yelling, she swings the pan and clocks him in the head. Without waiting around to see what happens next, she runs out of the house, tears streaming down her face, heart pounding. He chases after her through the neighborhood, but she spots a U.S. Marine recruitment center and ducks inside. The officer there sees what's happening and tells the guy to back off. Then he turns to Cruz and offers her something she never thought she'd hear, a chance at a new life. That night, Cruz doesn't even have a bed. She sleeps in the woods, curled up and scared. The next day, she heads back to her job, trying to keep her head down. But the boyfriend shows up with his crew, trying to intimidate her again. She stays late to avoid them, but her boss notices and calls the cops. They offer to take her somewhere safe, a shelter for the night, and help her file for a restraining order the next day. Eventually, she takes the test to join the Marines. She blows everyone away with how tough and smart she is. Word spreads fast about this girl who's got the kind of grit the Marines are looking for. A high-ranking general hears about her and wants to meet. He's impressed with her athletic background and asks why she never went to college. Cruz just shrugs and says she didn't have anyone in her corner. The general nods, tells her that the Marines don't leave their own behind, and says if she's ready to leave her old life completely, there might be something special waiting for her. Cruz doesn't hesitate. She's in. Meanwhile, Joe is back at CIA headquarters being grilled by her boss, Caitlin Meade, and Deputy Director Byron Westfield. They want answers about why she ordered the drone strike. They think maybe Cobain could have been saved, that there was still time. But Joe lays out plain. Cobain was already compromised, surrounded by dozens of enemies, and she had to protect the bigger mission. Westfield eventually gives in, but makes it clear, no more agents with visible tattoos. Meade then orders Joe to head to Fort Bragg and start scouting for a replacement. Joe agrees, but clearly carries the guilt of what happened. Back home, Joe is reunited with her husband Neil and their daughters, Charlie and Kate. Charlie is thrilled to see her mom again, but Kate couldn't care less. She's mad and distant, not even trying to hide her resentment. Neil suggests Joe should call before showing up next time, so they can prepare the girls. Joe nods, but you can tell it stings. Soon, Joe is at Fort Bragg where she's introduced to Cruz's file. She reads through the girl's history, but isn't convinced she's right for the Lioness program. That is, until she watches Cruz sparring with another soldier. Cruz might lose the match, but she fights like hell. That gets Joe's attention. Later, Joe and Cruz sit down for private talk. Joe explains what the Lioness program really does. Agents go undercover, build relationships with the wives and daughters of dangerous targets, and gather intel from the inside. Some people might find the tactics questionable, but Cruz doesn't flinch. When Joe asks her to strip to check for tattoos, she sees the scars from Cruz's past. Cruz owns them like a badge of honor. Joe respects that and brings her on board. Cruz's first mission involves getting close to the daughter of a high-level Iraqi militia leader. She gets a full rundown, including her new identity. She tries to ask Joe about her personal life, but Joe shuts that down quick. "We're not friends," she says. "But if your cover ever blows, I'll be there. Just trust me." The two of them land at a U.S. base in Kuwait where they meet the rest of the Lioness team. There's Bobby, Randy, and Tucker, who are already tracking the target's location. Early the next morning, Cruz is woken up because her mark is on the move. Joe reminds her of her cover story, drills the details into her head. Cruz starts getting nervous. She doesn't even know who this girl is. Joe says that's the point. The less she knows, the more real it'll seem. Cruz ends up at a fancy store, bumping into the target girl and introducing herself as Zara. The girl's name is Aaliyah, and surprisingly, she seems to like Cruz right away. She invites her to keep shopping with her, and Cruz goes along, playing her part perfectly. Joe watches from a distance, satisfied. Later, Joe checks in with Meade, giving her an update on Cruz's progress. Meade, never fully trusting anyone, wants to test Cruz further. She gives the green light. Meanwhile, back in the States, Joe's daughter Kate gets into a nasty fight during a soccer match, and Neil, who works as a surgeon, is dealing with a heartbreaking case involving a little girl with a brain tumor. He tells the parents their options are limited, and the news hits them like a truck. One of them even punches Neil out of frustration, but he stays calm. Later, he scolds Kate for fighting. She throws back that he doesn't understand because he's white. He reminds her he's her dad before anything else. Joe finally returns home and finds Kate complaining that her dad took her phone. She and Neil sit by the pool and talk about everything. Then Joe goes to speak to Kate, who thinks her parents are getting divorced and wants to live with her dad. Joe has a heart-to-heart with her, telling her to grow up, find a purpose, and start appreciating her father. That night, while Joe and Neil are getting intimate, both their phones ring. Neil has an emergency surgery to perform. Joe, on the other hand, is needed immediately. Cruz has been grabbed by masked men during a nighttime jog and thrown into a van. Joe gets to a hidden CIA training facility where Cruz is being put through a brutal simulation. She's being blasted with water, locked in a freezing room with loud music, and then waterboard, all to see how long she can last. Cruz fights back again and again, refusing to give up. Joe finally walks in, revealing it was all a test. Cruz, bruised and shaken, is furious, but Joe tells her she needed to know if Cruz could survive if captured. Even after Cruz proves herself, Joe wants more. The team's worried about the ethics, but Joe signs off on pushing her further. Cruz is restrained again, but fights like an animal until she breaks down screaming. Eventually, the team pulls the plug, and Joe realizes they've pushed her far enough. Back at Fort Bragg, Joe explains to Cruz that what she went through is only a taste. If she ever gets caught for real, it'll be worse. Cruz nods, but deep down, she knows she never wants to go through anything like that again. Joe finally got back to the squad's hangout spot where the rest of the Lioness crew was chilling. After cleaning herself up and taking a quick breather, she sat everyone down and opened up about the awful stuff that had happened to her with those soldiers. The team didn't take her story lightly. They were seriously pissed off and decided they weren't going to just let it slide. A bit of digging later, they found out where those guys were. hanging out at some local bar. The whole crew headed there, and Bobby didn't waste time. He threw the first punch, and in no time, the whole place turned into a chaotic barroom brawl. Jo had one guy in particular on her mind, the one who pinned her down. When she finally got her hands on him, her anger took over, and she nearly choked the guy unconscious before her teammates stepped in and pulled her away. She was still steaming when her phone buzzed. It was Aaliyah calling. Jo stepped outside to take it. Aaliyah invited her to come along on a trip to Chesapeake with a few of her friends. Cruz had just gotten into a car accident, so Jo was hesitant, but Aaliyah wouldn't take no for an answer. She was pretty firm about wanting Cruz there. So Cruz hit the road to Chesapeake, with Jo staying on the line, giving her pointers and guidance over the phone. Cruz eventually made it to a bridge and, in a moment of tension or maybe strategy, tossed her phone into the water, cutting off contact. Jo later met up with her boss, me, and gave a quick status update on Cruz. She had a bad feeling that this beach party might be more than just fun and games, maybe even a trap. To play it safe, she had the team nearby in case they needed to pull Cruz out fast. While Jo was in the bar, a man stopped her. CIA guy named Kyle McManus, an old colleague of hers. He wasn't just there for drinks. He wanted to borrow some of her team for a sketchy operation. Apparently, one of his insiders got arrested for drunk driving, and this guy had links to a trafficking ring. Homeland Security and Congress couldn't find out about this, so Kyle was desperate. Jo thought he'd completely lost it, but eventually agreed to let him take 3 of her guys on one condition. He had to return them within 24 hours, safe and sound. Meanwhile, Cruz showed up at Aaliyah's family mansion. Some security guards ran her plates while she got escorted poolside. Aaliyah greeted her and introduced her to a bunch of her rich snob of friends who whispered behind her back, calling her another lost puppy Aaliyah had dragged in. Aaliyah didn't hold back and gave Cruz a rundown on the drama. Apparently, most of her friends were secretly hooking up with Kamal, the brother of Aaliyah's fiancé, Essen. Aaliyah suggested a beach trip, but Cruz's swimsuit was too plain for Aaliyah's taste. So, she got her a more revealing one. Cruz wasn't too happy about showing her scars and bruises, though. Aaliyah noticed and started doubting the whole car crash excuse. Back with the Linus crew, they were working on a plan to rent a yacht and get a better view of what was happening at the house without getting caught on land. Word got out that a doctor had been called to check on Cruz, and the team got worried. But with the phone signals being monitored, they couldn't warn her. Jo filled the crew in on Kyle's extraction mission, and 2 guys, Randy and Tucker, agreed to go help. Jo, Bobby, and Tech stayed back, keeping tabs on Cruz using hidden mics. The doctor examined Cruz and figured her bruises were from someone punching her, not a car crash. Bobby was ready to storm in and grab her, but Jo told him to chill. She begged Cruz through the bug to talk her way out of it. Cruz put on a good act, tears and all, and told the doctor she just wanted to start over, make some friends, and that the guy who hit her had already been arrested. Tech still wanted to teach the men who hurt her a lesson, but Jo confessed it was kind of her fault that things escalated like this. The doctor later told Aaliyah that Cruz was fine and just needed some rest. Then Aaliyah and Cruz went for a walk on the beach, where Aaliyah dropped the bomb. She was getting married soon, maybe in Kuwait or Dubai. She also warned Cruz about 2 of her friends, Malikika and Neshwa, saying they're always jealous of any new friend she makes. Cruz was confused about why she even hung out with them, but Aaliyah explained that her life isn't hers. Her family makes all her choices. Jo came home and caught her daughter, Kate, making out with a boy in the dark. She stayed calm, asked for the boy's phone, called his mom, and kicked him out. Kate got defensive and refused to see what she did wrong. She told Jo she didn't ask to be born and would live her life how she wanted. When Jo later confronted Neil about it, turns out he gave Kate permission, as long as she kept her jeans on. Jo was shocked and upset that Neil didn't check with her first. He hit back, saying Jo is always too busy to parent. Later that night, Cruz couldn't sleep. She wandered to the kitchen looking for a drink, but ended up drinking tap water. One of the guys approached her and started getting aggressive. Cruz fought back, hitting him hard in the throat and heading to her room. He didn't take the rejection well and followed her, trying to barge in. Cruz grabbed a pen to defend herself, but luckily, a security guard showed up and broke things up. Meanwhile, Kyle was in Texas in a truck with Randy and Tucker, watching for the prison van. They spotted it, along with another van trailing it. Kyle let that van pass and then used an EMP to shut down the prison van. The second van crashed thanks to a trailer on the road. Kyle grabbed the prisoner while Randy and Tucker took care of the others. Another van tried to ram them later, but they gunned it down, switched cars at a barn, blew up the first vehicle, and drove off. Everyone was worried about how bad this looked, but Kyle was sure no one would link it to them. Back at the beach, Cruz learned that Essen had a surprise trip planned. The Lioness team overheard this and scrambled to follow. One of Aaliyah's friends accidentally revealed they'd be taking a private plane. That worried Joe, since they might lose Cruz. At the airfield, the Lioness team couldn't get in without the plane's tail number. Thinking fast, Cruz called out the number like it was no big deal, making Joe proud. Then she boarded the plane, having no clue where it was headed. Turns out, they landed on a beach in Long Island. Aaliyah's security kept an eye on a yacht nearby, not knowing the Lioness team was using it to watch Cruz. Bobby hung around the shore while Cruz and Aaliyah swam in the ocean. Aaliyah shared that she wasn't thrilled about getting married. She didn't get to choose who she married, but at least Essen was decent. The Lioness crew looked into Essen and Kamal and learned they were actually Saudi royalty, running an oil company called Qudra Petrol, one with serious power that they'd never heard of. Joe thought the wedding could be the perfect time to take out Aaliyah's dad, Asmar. But if the wedding happened in Saudi Arabia or the Emirates, it would be nearly impossible. Joe also got word that Kyle's mission turned into a disaster. People died, and it happened during the day. She called him up, furious he lied. Kyle admitted it, but said the cops blamed a cartel for the mess. He was about to be debriefed. In the briefing room, Kyle met with me and Westfield. They had footage showing Kyle leaving the scene of the hit. Me was furious and said Kyle had put her in a bad spot. Westfield pressed Kyle to reveal who helped him, and Kyle finally admitted he used the Lioness team. Kyle defended his actions, saying if they didn't get the intel, 5 Al-Qaeda guys would sneak into the U.S. That bit of info got me interested. She told Kyle to get proof while she tried to cover things up. Joe later got a call from Kyle, telling her the CIA already knew about their involvement. Then me called, demanding to know where Joe was. They needed to talk. Meanwhile, Kate was in a car with friends when they crashed. Neil, who was in the middle of surgery, rushed out when he heard and saw Kate being wheeled in. She had a broken leg and concussion. Doctors reviewed her scans. She had a fractured vertebra and femur, but it could have been worse. One girl needed emergency surgery, and one didn't survive. Neil told Joe what happened and promised to be there. Then he saw Kate's blood work and found out she was pregnant. Instead of getting mad, he felt let down. He talked to her, reminding her of the 2 things that change lives, cars and sex. Kate had a bit of attitude at first, but went quiet when she heard her friend had died and that she was pregnant. She tried to deny it, but Neil had had enough. He warned her that if the baby survived the crash and the meds, she'd have a massive decision ahead. She said sorry, but Neil told her this was her lesson to learn.